I hope we have Professor Jordan Peterson. This is a professor from University of Toronto who came into the public eye for refusing to use all these different pronouns he's told to use. And I think it's indicative of a massive wave going on in academia where they are eating their own. I'm not talking about people rooting out racist, sexist, homophobes, etc. I'm talking about liberals versus liberals for the most part. We just had a guy in NYU who's been asked to leave for his anonymous Twitter account. We have a professor in Ottawa, Janice Fiamenko, I believe. She's getting in trouble. And every time you look at these people and you go, all right, let me hear this Holocaust denier or something, you listen to what they're saying and it is benign. It could not be less radical. And it's really a great mirror on how radical their detractors have become. Professor, are you there?
I'm here.
How are you, sir?
I'm well.
Have you noticed, by the way, that these waves of professor purging tend to happen around Halloween? Is that a coincidence?
Well, I hope it's just a coincidence, but you never know about something like that. I mean, it is when the monsters come out, after all.
Yeah, last year there was an email, I think it went around Missouri State, where that said, hey, these are the costumes you can't wear. And then a woman who focused on early childhood education said, this is actually exactly how we're told to talk to infants. And that started an avalanche.
Too, right?
Pardon me?
Yeah, there was a big scandal at Yale last year where the administration sent out recommendations for non-offensive costumes, and one of the housemasters wrote an email to her students suggesting that it might be okay for them to wear whatever damn costume they wanted to wear.
Right.
And she got just pilloried for that. She wrote a recent article describing her experiences that was just posted a couple of days ago. Yeah, it was awful.
And
the Yale administration,
I think she quit after that.
She did, yeah.
Yeah, you keep seeing that, like there'll be a story, the Ku Klux Klan came through our campus, was yelling the N-word, dragging a noose, and it's horrible what we go through. And you hear that story and you think, I don't really see the Klan going to universities. That's not really. And then as we discover that's a hoax, we also learn the president steps down. And you think, what is with all this capitulation? It just fosters more outrage.
Yeah, well, it is rather hard to understand. You know, like one of the things I've really been struck by, among many other things over the last month, is there's been virtual silence on the part of my faculty colleagues, apart from the 200 or so who wrote a letter basically denouncing me. But they don't really understand. So one of the things I've come to realize, for example, is that I think the social justice warriors are going to go after the evolutionary psychologists and biologists next. I mean, they're after the scientists, because their claim, for example, that there's no such thing as gender, and that or even that there's no such thing as biological sex, which is what my opponent on TVO's The Agenda argued the other day, Nicholas Matt, who's a professor at the University of Toronto. I mean, we're dangerously close to enshrining certain kinds of, I would say, erroneous pseudoscientific presuppositions right into our law. And another thing that we haven't really talked about, you know, because I've been so focused on the gender identity part of Bill C-16 and its equivalent legislation, is the gender expression component. If you read the Ontario Human Rights Commission website carefully, what you'll find essentially is that there's no difference between the now protected gender expression and fashion choice. Because gender expression is just how you manifest your gender identity in clothing and dress, essentially. And there's no difference between that and fashion. And so I'm telling you, it looks very much like Ontario has already made fashion criticism into a hate crime. And yeah, you know, it'd be funny if it wasn't true. Well, but because it is true, it's not funny at all. It's quite awful.
Well, I remember being a punk rocker in Ottawa in the 80s, and it was really hard to be accepted as the group. You had to have the right pants, the right gear. You had to like the exact right bands. Everything had to be perfectly consistent. And if you were one thing off, like you had crass on your leather jacket, well, they're vegetarian, so that's wrong. It seems so easy to become a woman that we've trivialized womanhood to the point where it's less than punk. Or being a mod.
Yeah, one of the funny things that's happening about that is that there's actually a split developing on the left between the feminists and the gender bender types. Not the transsexuals per se, I wouldn't say, but them too. But more the ones that are doing this for trendy reasons. Is that there are a variety of feminist women who aren't so happy that being a woman has now been basically deemed nothing more than a subjective choice. And so the Title IX advocates in the United States, for example, are starting to go to war with the equity people because they're both extreme and both on the left, but their extremism is butting heads. So
right. Well, it's like extremist Muslims. They end up killing more Muslims than anyone else. Or you go to a Nazi skinhead music festival and there's going to be tons of fights breaking out just because that's their nature. They're a violent people. And these far lefties are so dogmatic and aggressive that you lock them in a room together and they're going to cannibalize each other.
Yeah, well, they're a funny kind of aggressive, too, because they don't actually engage in physical fights because that would take individual against individual. They tend to gang up together in little mobs and then go after people like that New York professor, which is, that's what happened to him is absolutely appalling.
And he again, he's a liberal. He used an anonymous Twitter account. He never cited NYU once. I have no idea how they found out that it was him. But now he's been forced to step down. And all he did was say, I think these trigger warnings and safe spaces are ridiculous. And that is ultimately what's best for the students. I mean, we have law students now who are being told they don't have to attend rape law classes. Well, now you've made a worse lawyer.
Yeah, I know. Well, one of my credos, by the way, is I like to terrify my students. I'm dead serious about that, man. I think if they're not a little bit afraid of me, there's something absolutely wrong. Like the course I teach called Maps of Meaning, which is based on a book I wrote about 20 years ago. I mean, one of the things I'm trying to convince my students of is that if they would have been in Germany in the 1930s, the probability that they would have been Nazis instead of, oppressed people rescuing heroes is almost 100%.
Right.
And I'll tell you, if you do enough psychological analysis to know that you could have been a guard in the Auschwitz camps, that's not exactly the sort of thing that makes you feel safe. And it shouldn't either, because human beings we have an unbelievable capacity for malevolence, and it often disguises itself in, this kind of smug self-righteousness that characterizes these bloody neo-Marxists that have invaded the campuses and that are in the process of invading the rest of the culture as fast as they can possibly manage it. I'm not their friends, not in the least.
Right.
And the idea that we should be making students feel safe on campuses is absolutely absurd. You read someone like Nietzsche or Dostoevsky or Solzhenitsyn, those people will terrify, or Carl Jung for that matter, those people will terrify you right down to the bottom of your soul. That's how you can tell you're being educated.
Yeah, you remind me of
absolutely appalling.
Of Werner Herzog in that documentary about Timothy Treadwell, who was eaten by a bear that he thought he could make friends with. And Werner goes, Timothy sees nature as friendly and all-forgiving. I, on the other hand, see it as highly cruel and irrational, and it will devour you at any opportunity. And then guess who gets eaten by the bear? Not Werner, Timothy.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. I mean, to some degree, it depends on whether you're a follower of Rousseau or a follower of Hobbes. That's right. One way to look at it, right? But I mean, we're supposed to be toughening up students. We're supposed to be preparing them to take on difficult intellectual battles and to stand up forthrightly as citizens. And what's happening in the U.S. is this pandering to people who are pathologically not anxious so much, because I can understand that, but cowardly, because you can be anxious and brave, right? It just means that you are afraid, but you'll stand up and face things that you're frightened of. But you can be anxious and cowardly, which means you retreat and you want the whole world to kowtow to your inability to deal with I would say the horrors of society and the terrors of nature. And you could add to that the malevolence of the human soul. And if you get educated, you start to understand those sorts of things, and it's not pretty and it's not comfortable.
Well, isn't this sort of I almost think this is a good argument against capitalism and the free market, because the client at these schools is these kids, these annoying millennials, and they want philosophy of self, how to be gay, all these ridiculous classes. And so the school goes, well, we don't want to burn a bridge here. Let's kowtow to the customer.
Well,
the customer's always right.
I feel bad for the millennials. They've been taught by these politically correct types ever since they were little. I mean, and this is really happening in Canada at an extraordinarily rapid rate. You have institutions like the Ontario Institute for the Studies of Education, which is an absolutely appalling institution in my estimation. And, they've produced nonstop political activists in the guise of teachers who've been teaching this nonsense to young people, right from elementary school forward. I mean, what the hell do we expect? And then in the United States, they've taken these millennials and ratcheted up their tuition costs and then forced them into a kind of indentured servitude.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason that they're being kowtowed to, because you can't declare bankruptcy on your student loans in the United States, eh? So the young people are being enticed into mortgaging their future, just like indentured slaves were or indentured servants were when they were taken from Europe 200 years ago.
Yeah,
So,
I owe my soul to the company store.
that's right. That's right. And then the millennials, the anxious social justice warrior types who want protection, they push and say, well, this frightens me. Maybe I should be protected. And the administration and the faculty goes, oh, yes, that really is scary. We really should protect you. And all it does is validate their fear. And these people aren't very old, and they need some guidance. That's what the hell university's for. That to protect, maintain, and expand the culture instead of taking bloody axe swings at its roots,
Right.
which is what's happening now.
Anyway. How you doing? Can we talk to you for a second?
Yeah, sure.
So, what does your shirt say there?
It says America was never great.
What's your biggest problem with Trump?
All his views.
Can you name one?
He's sexist.
In what sense?
The fact that he doesn't support abortion and the woman's right to choose.
But I think a good 50% of women in America are also pro-life.
A lot of women aren't.
Right, but if 50% of a group is something, then...
I'd like to see those statistics.
All right, well, if hypothetically 50% of the women were pro-life, would it still be sexist to be anti-abortion?
I'd really like to see your statistics.
I know, but hypothetically, if I was right...
I don't go by hypothetical.
Well, we don't have a computer here. We can't look it up.
So I can't answer your question.
Any man
Yeah.
who dyes his hair blonde is a freaking jerk. Okay.
Freaking jerk. I got to hand to you, it is pretty brave to come here. I mean, the odds of you getting punched are pretty high.
I know.
Are you gay?
I am queer.
Oh, you don't use the term gay?
Well, I'm not gay. I'm bisexual.
Oh, I've always been suspicious of bisexual. It seems like a phase.
Oh,
I
well.
see a lot of old bi people.
Oh, well. You're pretty ignorant.
Modern feminism is, why aren't there more female superheroes? I don't know, because it's not a feminine thing to fly to a bank robber and punch him in the face.
Assessment. How can it be such a risk if they don't know where he stands? What are you doing, Gavin?
I have spent a lot of time with British people. They are huge wimps, and their entire life philosophy revolves around capitulation, and that is why they've lost their whole island to Islam. If you look at the demography of 18 to 25s there, they're all named Muhammad. London looks like Londonistan.
All of them?
The most common name in Britain now with young people is Muhammad.
Yes, and then
You
Simon.
incorporate all the spellings.
Yeah.
And all these sort of satellite suburbs that are around London, I mean, they're not all Muslim, but they're Bangladeshi, they're brown. So London's gone, and it's because their whole thing is, who am I not offending? They see Trump offending people, and they go, well, that's going to be terrible. No, dude, we tried capitulation. We tried being weak. We tried conducting all our affairs based on who it's going to make maddest or who's going to make not maddest, and it doesn't work.
Now, when we take men out of the equation, we shape lives like you and make these giant ginger babies who drink moonshine all day.
That's not moonshine, that's sweet tea my meemaw made me. And second of all,
Your meemaw made you she made you into a sweetie.
They all look the same. They're all skinny. They're usually sons of college professors, I find, these Antifa guys. And they're dressed like little ninjas, and they look like bowling pins. And he just walks in, literally hitting 4 at once. I'm not exaggerating. He's a monster, this guy. Vroom, vroom, vroom. This guy sums up the trouble with millennials today. Never had a job. Mommy tells him he's special.
I'm Josh.
Look at his fake smile. Don't smile. Oh.
Can I kiss you?
Can I kiss you? That's the show, dummy. 2017 resolutions for white
try
guys.
to recognize that America was never great for anyone who wasn't a white guy. Can we all
Stop.
just agree?
Stop. I would like you to know what America was like for a white guy. First of all, we didn't steal the land from the Indians. We fought them for 400 years. Did a lot of bad, but had a lot of bad to us. That was just to establish it. Then we had to have a revolution to get the British out. Then we had to have a civil war to end slavery. You know how many people died in that? 620,000 white guys died ending slavery.
Okay.
Are men being discriminated against?
Yes, clearly. I mean, the data shows it, from danger in the workplace to alimony payments to all these perpetual myths that, like, women make less money than men. And we accept it because we can take it on the chin. We're very nice guys. But I'm getting sick of it. I'm getting sick of the way we're portrayed in sitcoms. I'm getting sick of the way fatherhood is trivialized and single motherhood is put on a pedestal, because it's bad for America.
When men actually petition for for custody of their children, they're very likely to get it.
What?
That's actually not true.
That actually is.
That is total bull.
It's a man at a women's march putting on an American flag hijab. I mean, I think this has to be a t-shirt. What the hell? Do Muslims even want men to wear hijabs? Isn't that blasphemous to their culture? If you went to Saudi Arabia and you said, hey, dude, look, I have a hijab on. Solidarity with women of America. He'd blow himself up right next to you. I don't understand it. And I have a sneaking suspicion, by the way, that these women are not Muslims. They just learned how to do a hijab, and they're doing everyone up.
Like
totally irrational.
going to Beijing.
And there's this myth that they hate us because of our foreign policy or something. They hate us because we're infidels, and the Quran says destroy all infidels. Who's harder on Muslims than Muslims? They're totally insatiable. I mean, you can have a burqa on in Saudi Arabia, and some guy's going to come up and go, really? Purple socks? Are you kidding me?
You have the
Shocking. A statue that was at a college near Boston. I think it's Wellesley. This sculpture is called the Sleepwalker, and people noted that it made them feel unsafe. Yes, students at the school argued that it made them feel unsafe to see this naked man who is sitting there frozen. He can't get you. He's a statue. But no, these social justice lefties are just ugly, crappy, unfun people who don't know how to appreciate the finer things in life.
It reminded me of women in the workforce, where they would say something and you sort of go, yeah, that's a good idea. Anyway, let's get back to having a great time being hilarious.
It turns out that if you put all the various possible spellings of Muhammad together, it is the most common baby name in England and Wales.
England is lost. Push it out into sea. We had a good fight, and it's over now. We can only hope we don't mimic that same failure here on our border.
It is out at sea.
There is one.
No, it's got to go straight.
Go further out
Scrape
to sea.
the bottom
Okay.
off so it floats. Most women are happier at home. They are pretending that they like working, and they're not making money because they don't stay all night at the office. They don't go the extra mile. They don't work all weekend. You're making a mistake. You would be much happier at home with a husband and children. I don't know why this is such a popular trend, emotion-based politics. Maybe it's because women are getting involved in politics, or maybe they want to get young people more involved. I think it's just business. The New York Times wants as many people to read it as possible, so they go on this heartstring, this disingenuous information, just to make a sweet sort of kid's story. But I mean, it's not sweet, but every article they have has this sort of Oprah tint to it.
Vote if you don't pay tax, you can't vote.
That was what my father always said.
Really? I've just been obsessed with this recently, thinking, you're not a customer. You don't have a say in how this restaurant goes. That's like strangers coming in off the street, homeless men, and saying, I want this on the menu, and then walking out.
Now it's his
Everyone
year.
has to be involved in politics now. So women are on board, and they have to have an opinion, and young people have to have an opinion, and they don't belong in the political discourse. It's like Dungeons and Dragons. Everyone has to be in Dungeons and Dragons now, and they're throwing these 14-sided die going,
20-sided.
Bernie Sanders, What are they doing?
Hello. You want to see more of me? Subscribe below.